There was a time in Britain when the kitchen was the heart of everything. Before the supermarket shelves filled up with pre-packaged crisps and ready-made party food, British people made their own snacks from scratch. Every gathering, every school fete, every Sunday afternoon had something homemade waiting on the table, and most of those recipes have simply vanished. Nobody talks about them anymore. Nobody makes them anymore. Today we are counting down 25 forgotten British homemade snacks from the 1970s, and for each one I am going to tell you exactly how they were made. Let us start at number 25. Number 25. Bloater paste toasts. Bloaters are whole smoked herrings, and British people in the 1970s would turn them into a deeply savoury spread for toast. You would take 2 smoked bloaters, remove the skin and bones carefully, then mash the flesh in a bowl with a generous knob of softened butter, a squeeze of lemon juice, a pinch of cayenne pepper, and a little white pepper. The mixture got beaten together until it became a rough paste, then spread thickly onto slices of white toast cut into fingers. Sometimes, a tiny sprinkle of malt vinegar went on top. The toast fingers were served warm, the buttery fish paste melting slightly into the bread. Bloater paste toasts were a common tea-time snack and a staple at buffet spreads throughout the decade. Today, almost nobody in Britain even knows what a bloater is, let alone makes a paste from one. Number 24. Dripping toast. This is one of the oldest British snacks there is, but it was still very much alive in 1970s households. Beef dripping, the solidified fat collected from roasting joints of beef, was kept in a bowl in the fridge. To make dripping toast, you would take thick slices of white bread and toast them under the grill until golden. While the toast was still hot, you spread it generously with the cold white dripping, sprinkled a good pinch of salt over the top, and ate it immediately. The fat melted into the hot bread in a way that was deeply satisfying. Some families spread it on cold bread instead. Many British people grew up with this as an after-school snack because it cost almost nothing and used up what would otherwise be thrown away. As concerns about saturated fat changed eating habits in the 1980s, dripping toast quietly disappeared from British kitchens entirely. Number 23. Sardine and tomato pinwheels. British people loved sardines in the 1970s and turned them into an impressive-looking party snack. You would drain a tin of sardines in oil and mash them well in a bowl with a spoonful of tomato puree, a few drops of Worcestershire sauce, a squeeze of lemon juice, salt, and black pepper. You then took a fresh, white loaf and sliced it lengthways into long, flat slices with a sharp bread knife. Each long slice was spread with the sardine mixture and rolled up tightly from one end, then wrapped in cling film and refrigerated for at least an hour. Once chilled and firm, the rolls were unwrapped and sliced into rounds about an inch thick, each one showing a spiral of sardine and bread. They were arranged on a plate and served cold. These pinwheels were a staple at birthday parties and neighborhood gatherings throughout the decade. Number 22. Cheese and Marmite soldiers. Every British household had a jar of Marmite in the cupboard, and combining it with melted cheese on toast was a beloved snack of the era. To make these properly, you would toast one side of thick white bread slices under the grill, then flip them and spread a thin scraping of Marmite on the untoasted side. Over the Marmite went a generous layer of strong grated cheddar cheese. The slices went back under the grill until the cheese was bubbling and turning golden in patches. Once out, they were cut into long fingers, called soldiers, and eaten immediately while the cheese was still stretching and hot. The combination of salty Marmite and sharp molten cheese was intensely satisfying. British people served these as an afternoon snack or a quick supper throughout the 1970s. Somehow this humble treat has largely disappeared from the modern British kitchen, despite how easy and delicious it is. Number 21. Potted meat sandwiches. Potted meat was a British preservation tradition going back centuries, but it remained a genuine homemade kitchen staple in the 1970s. To make it, you would cook a cheap cut of beef or pork, such as shin or belly, slowly in a covered pot with water, bay leaves, mace, salt, and pepper until the meat was completely tender and falling apart. The cooked meat was then finely shredded by hand or minced, then packed tightly into small ramekins or jars. The cooking liquid was skimmed of fat, and a thin layer of clarified butter was poured over the top of each pot and left to set and seal the meat. To eat, You would spread the potted meat thickly onto thin white bread or cream crackers. It was packed into sandwiches for school lunchboxes throughout the decade. Number 20. Fried bread squares with gentleman's relish. Gentleman's relish, known by its proper name, Patum piperium, is an intensely salty anchovy paste that has been made in Britain since 1828. In the 1970s, British people used it to create an easy but sophisticated party snack. You would cut white bread into small squares and fry them in a shallow layer of butter over medium heat until crisp and golden on both sides. The fried bread squares were drained on paper and left to cool slightly. A very thin scraping of gentleman's relish was then applied to each square because the flavour is extraordinarily powerful and a little goes an enormous distance. Sometimes a tiny sliver of cucumber or a caper was placed on top. These were served at dinner parties and drinks gatherings and were considered quite refined at the time. Number 19. Egg and cress sandwiches. This is possibly the most quintessentially British snack of the entire 1970s. To make them properly, you would hard-boil eggs, peel and chop them finely, then mix with enough salad cream, which is not the same as mayonnaise, to bind everything together. Salt, white pepper, and a tiny pinch of dry mustard powder went in as well. This filling was spread generously onto thin slices of soft white or brown bread, with a good layer of mustard and cress on top of the filling before the second bread slice was pressed down. The crusts were removed and the sandwiches cut into neat triangles or fingers. British people served these at birthday parties, church hall teas, and summer fetes throughout the decade. Simple, delicate, and genuinely delicious, these sandwiches have been largely replaced by supermarket versions that bear no resemblance to the real thing. Number 18. Cheese and pickle doorstops. In the 1970s, Branston pickle was as essential to British households as butter, and this chunky, spiced vegetable pickle combined with strong cheddar cheese on thick bread was a genuine institution. To make a proper version, you would cut 2 thick slices from a white or granary loaf. Butter both slices generously all the way to the edges, then apply a thick layer of Branston pickle on one side. Over the pickle went thick slices of mature cheddar cheese. The sandwich was pressed together and cut diagonally. The key was the ratio. Plenty of butter, a substantial spread of pickle, and enough cheese that you could actually taste it. British people packed these into school lunchboxes, took them on hiking trips, and ate them as late-night snacks after the pub. The homemade version with proper thick-cut bread and good strong cheese is rarely made anymore. Number 17. Devilled kidneys on toast. This Victorian classic was still being made in British kitchens during the 1970s and appeared at weekend breakfasts and supper parties. You would take lamb kidneys, halve them, remove the white core with scissors, then slice them. In a frying pan, you would melt butter and cook the kidney pieces quickly over high heat for just 2 or 3 minutes. To the pan, you added a teaspoon of dry mustard powder, a good dash of Worcestershire sauce, a pinch of cayenne pepper, and a splash of white wine or sherry. Everything was stirred together and cooked for another minute until the sauce thickened slightly around the kidneys. This mixture was spooned over hot buttered toast and served immediately. The flavour was rich, mustardy, and deeply savoury. British people considered this an economical and impressive snack, but as offal fell out of fashion, devilled kidneys disappeared from the table entirely. Number 16. Anchovy fingers. The British have always had a relationship with anchovies, and in the 1970s these salty little fish appeared in this party snack that was simpler than it looked. You would take a sheet of ready-made short crust pastry, roll it thin, and cut it into narrow rectangles roughly the size of a finger. A well-drained anchovy fillet was placed lengthways down the centre of each pastry strip. Then the pastry was folded over the anchovy and pressed to seal the edges. They were brushed with beaten egg and baked at 200 degrees for about 12 minutes until golden and crisp. Some versions added a very thin smear of anchovy butter inside before folding. These salty, buttery, crispy fingers were served hot at cocktail parties and disappeared almost instantly from the plate. Today, almost nobody makes anchovy fingers at home, and they have vanished so completely that most people have never heard of them. Number 15. Homemade Scotch eggs, not the dry, pale imitations you find in petrol stations today, but proper homemade Scotch eggs as British people made them throughout the 1970s. You would hard-boil 6 eggs for exactly 9 minutes, cool them in cold water, then peel them carefully. Good quality pork sausage meat was mixed with finely chopped fresh parsley, a pinch of mace, salt, and pepper. A portion of sausage meat was flattened in wet hands, wrapped evenly around each egg, ensuring no gaps. Each wrapped egg was rolled in seasoned flour, dipped in beaten raw egg, then rolled in fresh, white breadcrumbs. They were deep-fried in hot oil at 170 degrees for about 8 minutes until deep golden brown all over, then drained and cooled on a rack. Homemade Scotch eggs were a fixture at picnics, school fetes, and buffet tables throughout the decade. Number 14. Bloomer bread and dripping with beef jelly. Slightly different from plain dripping toast, this version used the dark, rich jelly that formed beneath the solid white fat in the dripping bowl. British people prized this dark jelly layer, which was concentrated beef cooking juices, enormously. You would scrape away the white fat layer carefully to reveal the brown jelly underneath, which was incredibly rich and savoury. This jelly was spread onto thick slices of crusty bloomer bread, finished with salt and sometimes a scraping of the white fat over the top as well. It was eaten cold, with the bread and jelly combination providing a deeply meaty flavour. Served at tea time with a strong mug of tea, this snack cost almost nothing and was made entirely from something that would otherwise have been discarded. Number 13. Potted shrimps on toast. This classic British snack was genuinely beloved in the 1970s and is now so rare it might as well be historical. To make potted shrimps, you would gently melt a large quantity of butter in a saucepan, then add a generous pinch each of mace, cayenne pepper, and nutmeg. Small cooked brown shrimps were stirred through the spiced butter and warmed gently for just 2 minutes. The shrimp mixture was then ladled into small ramekins and refrigerated until the butter solidified completely around the shrimps. To serve, you would dip the base of each ramekin briefly in warm water to loosen the pot, turn it out onto a small plate, and serve alongside hot buttered toast. The chilled spiced butter melted over the warm toast, and the combination was extraordinary. British people served this as a starter or snack at dinner parties throughout the decade. Number 12. Cheese footballs. These were a brilliantly simple homemade party snack that appeared on virtually every British buffet table in the 1970s. To make cheese footballs, you would mix together equal quantities of cream cheese and very finely grated strong cheddar in a bowl, seasoning with a pinch of cayenne pepper and white pepper. The mixture was chilled for 30 minutes until firm enough to handle, then rolled into small balls about the size of a large marble using lightly floured hands. Each ball was then rolled in a coating such as finely chopped toasted walnuts, smoked paprika, dried herbs, or crushed crackers. The finished cheese footballs were arranged on a plate with cocktail sticks inserted ready for guests to pick up. They were chilled until serving time. British people made these for every kind of gathering from children's parties to dinner parties because they were endlessly adaptable, cheap to make, and always eaten first. Number 11. Homemade sausage rolls. Not the commercial kind, but proper handmade sausage rolls as every British household knew how to make in the 1970s. You would begin with good quality pork sausage meat seasoned generously with white pepper, a small amount of ground mace, fresh thyme leaves, and salt. A sheet of homemade or shop-bought short crust pastry was rolled thinly and cut into long strips about 10 centimeters wide. A thick cylinder of sausage meat was laid down the center of each pastry strip. The pastry was folded over and pressed firmly to seal along the seam. Each long roll was brushed with beaten egg and cut into pieces about 5 centimeters long, each piece receiving 2 diagonal cuts on top to let steam escape. They were baked at 200 degrees for 25 minutes until deeply golden. British people made enormous batches for parties, fetes, and lunchboxes throughout the decade. Number 10. Tomato sandwiches with salad cream. This sounds extraordinarily simple, and it is, but British people elevated this into something genuinely special in the 1970s. You would slice ripe tomatoes very thinly and lay them out on a board. They were seasoned with salt and left for 5 minutes, then patted gently dry. Soft white bread was buttered right to the edges, then spread with a thin layer of salad cream, which had a tangy, slightly sweet quality entirely different from mayonnaise. The seasoned tomato slices were laid in a single layer over the salad cream, and a second slice of buttered bread was pressed on top. Crusts were removed, and the sandwiches cut into triangles. The combination of sweet tomato juice, salty seasoning, and tangy salad cream soaking into soft buttered white bread was something that cannot be replicated any other way. This simple snack was everywhere in 1970s Britain and has almost entirely vanished. Number 9. Cheese and onion pasties. Homemade pasties beyond the traditional Cornish meat version were a common British homemade snack in the 1970s, and the cheese and onion filling was especially popular. To make the pastry, you would rub cold butter into plain flour until the mixture resembled breadcrumbs, then add just enough cold water to bring it together into a firm dough. This was rested, then rolled out and cut into circles about 15 centimeters across. The filling was made by combining grated mature cheddar cheese with very finely sliced raw onion, salt, and white pepper. A generous mound of filling was placed on one half of each pastry circle, the edges dampened with water, and the pastry folded over and crimped firmly along the curved edge. The pasties were brushed with beaten egg and baked at 190 degrees for about 30 minutes until golden. British people packed these in lunchboxes and sold them at bake sales throughout the decade. Number 8. Celery with Stilton butter. Stilton cheese is one of Britain's great treasures, and in the 1970s British people made this simple but beautifully flavoured snack for parties and suppers. To make Stilton butter, you would crumble a good quantity of ripe Stilton into a bowl with softened unsalted butter at roughly equal proportions, then beat everything together vigorously until the butter was evenly streaked with the blue cheese. A small amount of port wine was sometimes worked in as well. Crisp, freshly cut celery stalks were filled generously with this Stilton butter, using a spoon or a piping bag if someone was feeling ambitious. The filled celery sticks were arranged on a long plate, sometimes sprinkled with a few walnut pieces on top. They were chilled until serving. The combination of cold, crisp celery and rich, tangy, salty Stilton butter was tremendously good and appeared at virtually every British cheese and wine gathering throughout the decade. Number 7. Faggots in onion gravy. Homemade faggots were a working-class British snack and tea-time staple throughout the 1970s, particularly in Wales, the Midlands, and the north of England. To make them, you would mince together pork liver, belly pork, and onion, then season the mixture with dried sage, salt, black pepper, and a pinch of mace. Breadcrumbs soaked in a little milk were worked through the mixture to bind and lighten it. The mixture was shaped into round balls about the size of a tennis ball, and each one wrapped in a piece of caul fat, which is a lacy membrane that came from the pig and could be requested from the butcher. The wrapped faggots were placed in a deep roasting tin, covered with a rich onion gravy made from softened onions, beef stock, and a little plain flour to thicken, then baked at 180 degrees for about 45 minutes. British people served these with mashed potato and peas. Genuinely wonderful, almost entirely forgotten. Number 6. Homemade hedgehog bread rolls. British people in the 1970s made these adorable shaped bread rolls for children's parties and school events. You would make a basic white bread dough by dissolving yeast in warm water, then mixing it into strong white flour with salt and a small amount of butter until you had a smooth dough that was left to prove until doubled. Small portions of dough were shaped into oval balls for the body and pointed at one end to form the nose. Raisin eyes were pressed in. Using clean scissors, you then snipped all over the rounded top of each roll in rows, angling the scissors slightly to create little pointed spikes covering the back of the hedgehog. The rolls were proved again briefly, brushed with beaten egg, and baked at 220 degrees for about 15 minutes. British people made batches of these for every children's birthday party in the decade. They were charming, fun to make, and completely forgotten today. Number 5. Gentleman's Sandwich Cake. This extraordinary British creation looked like a proper layered cake but was entirely savoury, made from sandwich bread. To construct it, you would take a whole unsliced loaf and cut it horizontally into 4 even layers. Each layer was buttered generously, then spread with a different savoury filling between the layers. Common fillings included egg mayonnaise, flaked tinned salmon with cream cheese, cucumber with cream cheese, and ham with mustard. The layers were stacked back into the shape of a loaf. Then the entire exterior was covered thickly with cream cheese mixed with a little salad cream, smoothed with a palette knife to look exactly like a cake frosted with icing. It was decorated with sliced olives, cucumber rounds, radish roses, and watercress. The whole construction was chilled and then sliced at the table. British people made this for special buffets throughout the 1970s, and it always caused astonishment. Number 4. Lard cake. Before anyone panics, lard cake was a genuine and genuinely delicious British baked snack with a long tradition, particularly popular in the West Country and Midlands. British people made this throughout the 1970s as an economical and satisfying treat. To make it, you would make a standard bread dough from flour, yeast, warm water, and a little salt and leave it to prove. The proved dough was then rolled out into a large rectangle. Cold lard was dotted generously over 2/3 of the dough surface, then sprinkled with brown sugar, dried mixed fruit, currants, and a generous dusting of mixed spice and cinnamon. The unfatted third was folded over the middle, then the remaining third folded over that, as though making rough puff pastry. This was rolled out again, the folding process repeated once more, then the whole piece was placed in a greased baking tin, pressed out to fit, scattered with a little extra brown sugar on top and baked at 200 degrees for about 25 minutes until golden and caramelized. Number 3. Bloomer and beef paste sandwiches. Homemade beef paste was a Friday task for many British mothers in the 1970s, made from the tail end of a cooked beef joint. Any leftover cooked beef was passed twice through a mincer, then beaten vigorously with softened butter, a splash of Worcestershire sauce, a pinch of ground mace, salt and pepper until it formed a rough, spreadable paste. This was packed into small jars and covered with a thin layer of melted butter to preserve it in the fridge for several days. The paste was then spread generously onto thick slices of crusty bloomer bread with a little English mustard underneath. British people ate these sandwiches throughout the week as lunchbox fillers, after-school snacks and late suppers. The flavour of properly made homemade beef paste on good bread is something completely unlike any commercially made version that has ever existed. Number 2. Homemade crisps with salt and vinegar. In the 1970s, British people made crisps at home, and they were a revelation compared to anything from a packet. To make them, you would peel potatoes and slice them paper-thin using a sharp knife or a mandolin if the family owned one. The thin slices were soaked in cold water for 30 minutes to draw out excess starch, then drained and patted completely dry between clean tea towels. A deep pan was filled with oil and heated to 180 degrees. The potato slices were fried in small batches for about 3 to 4 minutes, moving them constantly with a slotted spoon until they were pale golden and crisp with no soft spots remaining. They were drained on paper, then while still searing hot, they were sprinkled with fine table salt and a very light spray of malt vinegar. The vinegar created a slight sizzle on the hot crisps. British people made these for bonfire night, parties, and film nights throughout the 1970s. Number 1. Homemade bread and beef dripping with brown sauce. At the very top of our countdown sits this magnificently simple British snack that was eaten in millions of homes across the country throughout the 1970s. To make it, you would take a freshly baked or shop-bought white loaf and cut 2 thick, uneven, generous slices. Both slices were spread very generously with cold beef dripping straight from the fridge, the white fat applied thickly like butter with no restraint whatsoever. Over the dripping went a heavy drizzle of HP sauce or another brown sauce. The 2 slices were pressed together, wrapped in paper if being taken out, or simply held over the sink and eaten standing up because the dripping and sauce combined to create something that defied civilized dining. A pinch of salt was sometimes added. British people ate this snack in enormous quantities throughout the decade. It cost almost nothing, took 30 seconds to prepare, and tasted absolutely extraordinary. Today, it has completely vanished, a casualty of changing tastes, health advice, and a world that has simply forgotten how magnificent simple things can be. Now, which one do you remember most? Drop it in the comments below. And if this brought back any memories, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another journey back through the food that shaped a generation.